Women who were unable to get an abortion and were forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy to full term. What was it like for you? Where I live, abortion, at least for now, is illegal. Both my brother and I were adopted pretty much as soon as we were born. My brother's biological mum was married to a man who worked abroad for months on end. They had already had 2 or 3 sons, and while the husband was away, the mum had an affair and got pregnant with my brother. When she found out she was probably in a horrible mental state, and since abortion wasn't an option, she resorted to starving herself, falling down the stairs and throwing herself against the walls to try and miscarry. My brother was born about 2 months prematurely because of this behavior and was on life support for a while, but he recovered and is now a healthy adult. Not a personal experience, but in the communist Czechoslovakia, abortions had to be approved by a special committee. Sometimes it happened the committee didn't allow the abortion and the woman had to continue in her pregnancy. Our famous developmental psychologist Zdeněk Matejček took it as an opportunity to study the effect of being an initially unwanted child on its development. He longitudinally examined children of women who wanted an abortion, that is, didn't want the child, but weren't allowed it, so had to raise an unwanted child. In short, despite some women changed their opinion during the pregnancy or at least accepted the fact they were going to be mothers, their children still developed more slowly. They started walking, talking, etc. later than children in control group, and showed signs of deprivation similar to children in orphanages or dysfunctional families. The study was published in English for those interested. Langmajer, J. Matejček, Z. Psychological Deprivation in Childhood, 1976. University of Queensland Press. A very sweet and religious woman I know would go on like 3 Tinder dates a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. She didn't drink or anything. I think she was thinking this is the way to find a husband in the USA. IDK. She met a dude that she ended up banging after a glass of wine. It was completely out of character for her. She ended up pregnant, was in an excruciating 2-day labor with no meds. Guess the guy's parents are religious, and forced him to be with her. They're polar opposites and are miserable. She won't eat a Dorito because she can smell the GMO on it and the GMO chemical would get in her milk, but kept sneaking shots. Guess she's drinking now. She followed me to the bathroom once and calmly said, "I do not want this baby. If I have to keep him, I might do something horrible." I felt for her, but there's nothing I can do besides offer to watch him anytime she needs a break and be there for her if she needs a friend. I feel bad for everyone involved. They all seem so miserable. I tried contacting her closer friends about the severity of what she said to me, but I don't think postpartum is taken seriously in Hispanic cultures, or American, until it's too late. My mom told me once that if she wasn't religious, she would have aborted me, but she's glad she didn't. I'm the third of 4 kids. I was an accident. My parents planned my older sister and brother, who are 8 and 6 years older than me, respectively. Then after me they had my younger brother because they wanted me to have a sibling close to my own age. I know that my parents love me, but it was definitely stressful having 4 kids in the house. My parents struggled a lot. I can remember summers where there was barely any food in the house. My dad had anger issues, and often told me he wished he never had any kids. But can I brag for a moment? I'm the accident, but I'm the only kid who graduated college and owns their own home. I also have a pretty amazing husband. My little brother is my best friend and he now lives on the other side of the world with his beautiful wife. My older siblings are doing okay, but they've had a lot of issues and I've definitely learned a lot from their mistakes. Hey, I was the accident that showed up 6-7 years later too. Having a 4th child so the 3rd can have a friend is very odd to me and borderline irresponsible if that much strain was put on the household. The woman was my mum, and the baby was my sister. My sister is severely disabled and has been in pain every day of her life. Her personality is clearly that of a very independent woman, but she's stuck in a body that won't even allow her to walk without assistance. She can't drive, go to school, jump on a trampoline. She's confined to a wheelchair and has few friends. My mother's much loved career was over the moment she found out my sister was disabled, and we all knew it. I grew up in a very poor household as a result, especially since all my father's income was going towards hospital visits and treatment for my sister. My mother still wishes that she had had that abortion. The situation isn't fair to anybody involved. I got pregnant as a teen in a very religious household. My dad wanted me to have an abortion but couldn't go through with it. I think he inherently thought it was wrong. My mom refused because she saw it as murder and sinful. I had the baby, graduated high school, went to college, married the dad. Bad decision. Graduated early, eventually started a job, left dad, got divorced, got a new job, 3 promotions in 3 years. Did grad school full time while working full time and raising my daughter myself. I don't remember too much about the pregnancy other than I found out really late. It's a tough life afterwards but not impossible. I would not be who I am without my daughter, in the best ways possible, and we are both doing really well. She's 10 now and a really good kid. You're doing great, keep your head up. Not me but my friend. She was at the clinic actually on the table. Her family and the dad, no good, didn't stick around. Had been begging her not to do it. At the last minute she decided not to. She always said having the kid ruined her life. She was precarious mentally and emotionally with no support system, and it being responsible for a child just dragged her down. Her daughter emancipated herself at 16 and basically hates her mom. So yeah, I mean, these stories from women I had an abortion and now I regret it. There's another side too. CW. Sexual assault, violence, emotional abuse, physical abuse, throwaway account for privacy reasons. I have a lot of friends and family who follow this thread who don't know about what happened. My mother had a pretty severe substance abuse problem, which ended up killing her about a decade ago now. We grew up on a reservation, so there weren't many options for jobs or income. My mother's issues were expensive, and with her unstable state of mind it resulted in her prostituting her daughters, including me, to pay for her drugs. The first time I got pregnant, I was 13 years old. I had no idea what was wrong with my body, since no one ever explained or taught anything to do with sex ed to me. When my mother realized I was pregnant, she would force my brothers to repeatedly punch me in the stomach and force feed me alcohol until I miscarried. Abortion and healthcare was not available for us, and my family is Roman Catholic and did not believe in abortions. This happened about 3 more times, until one pregnancy my mother could not make me miscarry. The baby came out deformed, with barely functional brain activity. I hated that baby. Every time I looked at him, I resented everything about his existence. He died at 3 months. I left home, and it has been nearly 15 years since this all happened. I have a great job, an excellent education, an amazing group of friends. No one currently in my life knows anything about any of this. All they know is I don't get along with my family, so I choose not to associate with them. I'm sorry all of that happened to you, and I'm happy to see you've gotten out of that situation. I'm a child of this situation. My mum got pregnant with me while training to be surgical nurse with the army. She does not know who my dad is. I have an older sister, 4 years older, who was adopted out. Because of this she didn't feel she could adopt me out. Abortion was denied by the strict laws that govern it in my country. Her partner took me in as his own and they never told me I wasn't his. I found out on my own at 17 when I worked out my blood type didn't line up with either parent. My mum is APA, so is her entire family. Her partner, dad, the same. I'm O+. I spoke to my GP before confronting my mother to double check my findings. He confirmed I was my mother's. He had assisted my delivery before the Nurses Amendment Act passed and midwives became majority care providers for maternity. When I confronted my mother she burst into tears and said, "Sometimes Tinny with 3, you make a choice and spend your whole life regretting it and having to face that choice." My mother is severely mentally ill in my opinion. She was in an orphanage till age 2. She acts like friends and families are toys in the nursery. No interest until someone else shows interest. It's taken me years of therapy and 2 suicide attempts to adjust to the idea that she did me seriously damage via emotional neglect. Mum is the reason I'm pro-choice despite being a practicing Catholic. Worth noting that religion is not why she didn't obtain an abortion. Some people are too messed up. Sorry about formatting, I'm on my phone. I was the product of one of these pregnancies and as a result I absolutely believe that every child should be a wanted child. I first attempted suicide when I was 10. Throwaway created for this post. OP, I want to say thank you for asking this. I was in a really tough spot last year and had to have an abortion. I'd always been pro-choice, but never thought I'd be able to go through with a termination myself, until I had no choice. Single mother, unemployed, at that time, with 2 kids. 2 weeks after the termination, I got a job offer. I would not have been able to take the job had I gone through with the pregnancy. My life is still tough, but I'm getting back to where I need to be. I have no doubt that it would have been 100 times tougher had I not made the most difficult choice I have ever had to make. I cried like I have never cried before. I apologize to the baby I would not have. I cannot say that I have completely moved on, but I am getting there. Reading these stories helps me know that I made the right choice, so thank you. You are incredibly strong. Take solace in that. I'm sorry for your loss, but you have 2 beautiful children. I hope they bring you joy. I live in Ireland where we're currently coming up to a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment, the amendment that forbids abortions, and every family in the country knows someone who had a royal air abortion where they book an airplane to England, get an abortion, and take a plane back the same day. Unfortunately, due to the rampant Catholicism, they are often exiled by their families. My mother was battling breast cancer for a couple years and told she was sterile from the chemo treatments. Surprise, I showed up. When my dad and mom went to the doctor, he assured them that having me wouldn't affect her cancer in any way. Turns out he was lying to prevent my mom from getting an abortion. Her cancer was totally hormone dependent and totally brought back when I started growing. From birth my mom was an IQ with health related problems and my dad was consumed with caring for her, my 2 older sisters, and now a newborn. Mom died from cancer when I was 1 year old. I've always had a bit of survivor's guilt and it's colored every aspect of my life, living with the knowledge that I destroyed my family. As an adult, with my own kids, I wish they had just had the abortion. The doctor should have lost his job. It's not on you. You could not have done anything differently. Hope you know this. Horrible. I was raped. It was traumatizing watching my body change and feel the child start to move and kick me. My friends kept telling me that it would change. Once I felt the baby move, I would fall in love with it no matter the circumstances of its conception. But I never did. I was horribly depressed and thought about suicide quite often. I gave him up for adoption to a couple who are distant family friends. In a closed adoption. He's going to be 8 this year. He looks just like his biological father, which was a valid fear of mine. What an awful experience. I'm so sorry you went through that. You'd have to ask my mother her perspective. She's told me the only reason she didn't get an abortion while she was pregnant with me is that she found out too late, 6 months. I have no idea who my biological father is, but my mother did marry a man who raised me as his daughter. I have to say, I'm glad I wasn't aborted. I have a beautiful family of my own. However, the relationship with my mother is strained, to say the least. I'm 20 and my dad was 22 when he impregnated my biological mother with me. I believe she was about 5 years older, but they lived in a patriarchal country. I don't know if they considered abortion, but even if they had, I doubt they'd have been able to get one. My dad was in uni and had to drop out to support us. I haven't met my bio mom since I was 6, but people who knew her used to say that she had an abusive relationship with my dad. Not sure who was more abusive because they're both awful, but at least my dad loves us in his weird way. Basically my sister and I, who was born 2 years later, were always filthy and hadn't bathed in days, and we were basically those wild unkempt children that everyone hates. Once my dad remarried because our bio mom just abandoned us, basically, my stepmom. I just call her mom because she was more of a mother to me than the woman who gave birth to me, reformed me. She was extremely strict and our childhood continued to be horrible, but she made sure we were fed and clean and well behaved. We have a better relationship now and I don't care much for my bio mom, but my sister is very affected by it. My dad on the other hand had a rough childhood because his mother died earlier and my bio mom ripped him away from his family, so he had no one. And since he had me when he was young, he didn't get to do a lot of things he wanted to do. Now he's 42 and he is emotionally abusive to his wife and to us. He controls all aspects of our lives, and because we were living in Canada where there are laws that protected us from abuse, he forced us to move back to his country where women don't have as many rights, and now we are completely dependent on him. I used to have a job and go out with friends, and now I can't leave the house without him, and it's not just because of the abuse but because of the horrible situations for women here. Even I don't want to leave the house anymore because it's so stressful. What I'm saying is that I sometimes wish I was aborted. My parents would have had time to sort out their relationship, and my dad would have been able to do everything he wanted to. Maybe if he had kids later on he wouldn't have kept them prisoners the way he keeps us. I'm sorry you have to go through that crap. Hopefully you'll get going on your own pretty soon. Life doesn't have to be that way. Plan carefully a way out of this terrible prison. Don't give up. Texas changed the law regarding abortion a few years ago. It required doctors who performed abortions to have right to admit patients to the hospital or something like that, which meant a hospital had to be within a certain distance to the clinic. I may have the details wrong on that, but ultimately the consequence of this new law shut down many clinics in the state. That resulted in the remaining clinics with huge backup. I was one of those patients in need with nowhere else to go. I was about 7 weeks when I made an appointment for an abortion but had to wait 6 weeks to be seen. My spouse and I were young, in college, and decided that this wasn't the right time to have a kid. By the time I was able to get an appointment though, I felt too far along to go through with it and kept what happened to be our son. His father is a great dad and we're happy. I don't regret my decision. But I'm also acutely aware that Texas law is entirely interfering with women and their rights to choose. Many women don't have the kind of support that I had. The fact that we as women have to still worry about so much when we want to make a decision with our own bodies will forever blow my mind. These stories are insane and could have all been different if people would sit the frick down and stop making such an astronomical deal out of aborting. You would think that all these stories about women trying to commit suicide, throwing themselves downstairs, poisoning themselves, etc. would make people reconsider if it's really worth it to force women to stay pregnant. But I guess our lives don't matter, only the fetus. Somewhat related, I met a woman who was unable to get an abortion and took several doses of cinnamon a day. She miscarried within the month. Apparently fetuses do not like cinnamon in large quantities. I don't know if abortion was ever considered, but my mum fell pregnant at 16 and was then married to my dad 3 weeks later. He was 18 from a devout Catholic family. I suppose it was either marriage or end up in one of those young mum and baby homes since it was 1976. Still, didn't turn out bad. My dad always supported his family. I'm the 4th child and they've been married 42 years now. My dad isn't a practicing Catholic. He's very much an atheist now. I was brought up in a secular household. You would have to ask my mom, I guess. Nobody should be forced to have a baby. It ruins 2 lives, maybe more. The impact ripples into the future. I, 21, found out I was pregnant when I went to get birth control. My boyfriend, 22, and I used protection. But that doesn't always matter. We both agreed to get an abortion. But when I went to the clinic they said it was too late. I went over to my boyfriend's later that night and told him the news. His parents were telling us that adoption was an option. But no matter what choice we choose, it's the right choice. BF wanted to give the baby up for adoption, but I didn't. So in the end we agreed to keep her. After finding this out, BF's parents said they think we made the wrong choice, which is absolutely infuriating. They are good people and I love them. But saying that, especially after we made the choice, especially after they said whatever choice we made was right, was aggravating. We were told she was die the 30th of June, but she ended up being born a month earlier. I went to the hospital because I thought my water broke, but they didn't. Bulls. The next morning I'm in the worst pain of my life. I thought it might be constipation, so I tried to crap. A foot came out of me. My phone was in my room, so I had to waddle back to get it so I could call 911. Luckily I live 2 minutes from a hospital, so the ambulance got there right away. I ended up having a completely natural birth. The actual birth didn't hurt as much as I thought it would, but the labor pains were the worst thing in the world. Actually, I take that back. The worst thing in the world was all of the nurses and doctors telling me how traumatic my birth was. Like, let me decide for myself. Jesus. My daughter had to stay in the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, for a few weeks after she was born. She had some breathing issues and a bruised leg, but was healthy other than that. After she was born, my boyfriend moved in with my parents and I. Everybody loves her more than anything. Even though she was an unwanted pregnancy, she is very much a wanted child. TLDR. Ended up with a beautiful and loved daughter. There's a woman at my work who's pregnant. Her husband works in another department. They're both from Iran. They have 2 daughters. He's older than her and it's known that their marriage was arranged by their parents when she was 6. When she turned 18 she was flown into the country and they were married. I've never actually seen them interact. Despite working in the same store, they've never bothered to take lunch together. For example, she started hanging out with this Indian guy a lot. The way she looked at him, I could tell she had fallen for him. Everyone could. Then around the time we now know she got pregnant, the Indian guy quit, and she started looking really haggard. She lost 13 kilograms. After a while the bump started showing. She said that she hoped it was another girl, but it turned out to be a boy. She refuses to take any supplements. She doesn't want a baby shower. There's another month or 2 left and the bump is way too small. I'm guessing that it's the other guy's baby, or at least she thinks it is, and that she's been trying to miscarry. I wish there was something I could do, but we're not friends. I don't think that she likes me that much, and I'm a 25-year-old that's barely able to look after herself. My father was a bastard child, and I was his planned son. I love my father and he loves his parents, but I hate them because of all the terrible crap they did to him, and all the times they neglected him. I'll spite them till the day they die. My father is a man who should not exist, and by proxy, I am the same. Like my father before me, I will make the most of my life despite what may be thrown at me. But my father is an exception to a general rule. If you can't bring yourself to raise a child with as much love as you can muster, then don't raise them. And if you can abort, just do it. Don't take a gamble that the child might thrive despite the adversity. Totally agree with this. I was born as a bastard child, but luckily enough I was adopted. I love my adoptive parents and I'm happy to be alive, but I feel like my biological mother was extremely careless and selfish for not having an abortion. She had no idea if my life would turn out okay. She just had a kid that she left to an adoption agency and hoped for the best. My friend got pregnant when we were 19. She is the type who immediately totally shouldn't be a mother. She surprisingly refused to get an abortion or consider adoption, so her parents raised him. He's 14 now and they've given him a good life. She sees him every couple of weeks, but has otherwise 100% moved on with her life. Always been so weird to me. I was adopted when I was 3 weeks old. My birth mother already had a girl, and I was told she was unstable and may not have wanted to go through with the pregnancy. I grew up with parents who did drugs. My mom was a tweaker at time and physically and mentally abusive. My first panic attack was when I was 12 years old, and when I was in the 6th grade suicide was a daily thought. My parents separated at the age of 13 and my mom blamed me. I've experienced depersonalization that is too terrifying to describe throughout my young adult life. Now at 29, I now spend hundreds a month on therapy and take medication. Good enough for you pro-lifers? The child was born, so everything must be all good then. I did not want my last child. I had my 3rd child, a boy, at 36 years old. It was a rough and unplanned pregnancy, but I was okay with it until they refused to tie my tubes immediately after the birth due to some archaic Indiana law. I took my boy home and was supposed to return in 6 weeks. By that time he was colicky, inconsolable and wanted to nurse constantly, so I couldn't leave his side. His birth triggered a severe flare of my autoimmune disease, so I was in pain and beginning to see that my career was probably over. The depression was deep and long lasting. By the time I got him settled enough to go to get my tubes tied, I was almost 5 months pregnant. Too late to abort. My god, I wanted to die. I didn't take good care of myself. My gestational diabetes kicked in almost immediately and I had numerous severe low blood sugar episodes where I woke to my husband pouring soda down my throat. I had to be induced 6 weeks early because my heart couldn't handle the fluid overload and the baby was starting to show signs of distress. Then my little girl was born. I told my husband that I didn't want her. We couldn't afford her because I wasn't working. That we should let someone adopt her. He had resisted all of it. The moment they placed this tiny, fragile and beautiful little girl in my arms, I knew she needed me more than any of my babies ever had before. Instead of ordering someone else to give her a bottle, my original plan despite nursing all my other babies, I brushed my gown down and started nursing her right away. My girl will be 3 soon and she is still a joy. She's a little delayed because of my poor health choices during the pregnancy, but it's okay. I'm sorry for what I did then and I try to help her catch up. She's happy, full of energy and chases her big brother like a shadow. In all honesty, my little girl probably saved my life. If she hadn't needed me so much, I think I would have killed myself before the depression had a chance to run its course. So, it hasn't been easy, but we are happy and better off for having her here. I'm proud of you, Reddit. There's some very nice, rational, constructive conversations between people on both sides of the issue. This is what we need more of. It didn't change my stance but gave me great insight on how the other side sees things. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.